Hello, my name is Matt Browning. I am an associate professor at Clemson University and the director of the Virtual Reality and Nature Lab. I'm thrilled to talk with you today about the relationship between nature exposure and emotional intelligence. What I'm going to present is based off a recently published study with myself and colleagues all across the world. Everyone is either an expert in emotional intelligence or the health benefits of nature and good friends as well. You probably will recognize some names if you follow this literature. So to begin, I just wanted to show some of our good family friends here exploring the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and you can just see the smiles on their face. We know that spending time outdoors is really linked to social emotional health in childhood and later in life. These emotional developments set lifelong trajectories for physical and mental health for our kids, as well as psychological well-being, self-esteem, and related elements. And among the social emotional benefits might be emotional intelligence, a set of abilities or perceptions concerning the recognition of the meaning of emotions and reasoning or problem solving based off of them. And the underlying causes of emotional intelligence are mostly unknown. There are some genetic factors, but we don't really know how the environment impacts this really important trait. And it is a really important trait. Here are some of the primary and secondary health outcomes of emotional intelligence, everything from doing well at school, being at less risk of taking school bullying very hard and having suicidal ideation. And then later in life, obviously being more satisfied at work, having stronger social relationships, less propensity to mental illness, better able to emotionally cope, buffer against stressors, and actually better physical health behaviors and health utilization and costs. So what are the plausible relationships? Well, trait emotional intelligence, which is what we're talking about, is a constellation of perceptions located at really the lower levels of our personality. And there's 15 facets that have been proposed. I'm going to briefly talk about each of those. And here's our niece hiking in Washington State next to a very large mushroom. And you can see that there's a lot going on both emotionally and psychologically exploring this wilderness area. First, our nephew, Matt Bay, not being flexible and willing to adapt to new conditions here, finding this toy underneath the chair. And what can nature do with that? Well, attention restoration. Theory suggests that nature exposure can restore directed attention, which would promote cognitive flexibility, creativity, and playfulness when we're encountered with some scary creature like this. Another facet of emotional intelligence would be being clear about your own and other people's feelings. So nature exposure can facilitate self-reflection and mindfulness, which allows the recognition of mental events as they arise. Here's our son and daughter, and Isaac is doing a very good job being aware of his sister's emotions as he's flipping through this book. Isaac and Evelyn, again, in a different type of situation, capable of controlling and adaptively influencing emotions. Isaac's not doing a great job. He built this big sand castle and Evelyn is wrecking it. So even though he's outdoors and he's not benefiting from that exposure, it seems, there have been experimental studies, in fact, that have linked nature exposure to being able to control road rage, react less to provoked aggression, display lower frequency and a range of aggressive behaviors toward partners, reduced rates of violent crime, and reduced rumination. Another facet of emotional intelligence that's been linked to nature exposure is being reflective and less likely to give in to your urges. This is a series of photos from the famous marshmallow experiment where a child is asked to refrain from eating the marshmallow, and if they do that for a certain number of minutes, you get 2 marshmallows, and this child failed. Maybe if he wasn't in this boring room and if he was outdoors in nature, he would have been more likely to succeed. So the research on nature exposure related to this is promotion and ability to delay gratification, feel like time is lengthened, display less attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder symptoms, and reduce cravings for substance abusers. These have all been linked either in associations or experimental work to nature exposure. Another facet, being confident and likely to look on the bright side of life. Here is our another niece, Elise, rock climbing for the first time. No gear. This was an easy pitch, but she's very confident and looking on the bright side of life as she's exploring nature. There have been some studies that have shown that nature exposure allows you to emotionally recover from social ostracism, as well as promote the belief that major life issues are less severe unsolvable, and long-lasting. So based off of this past literature, we conducted an epidemiological study looking at associations between nature exposure and emotional intelligence, and it involved seeing whether the cumulative exposure to greenness over the life course translated to higher trait emotional intelligence levels. We used what's called a retrospective life course analysis. So looking back on where you have lived among young adults, they were college students, and asking them where they lived up to 3 addresses from birth to age 18, and then calculating objective measures of greenness around each of those addresses. And our hypothesis was that cumulative neighborhood greenness during childhood would be possibly associated with emotional intelligence during young adulthood. We used a standardized questionnaire for measuring emotional intelligence. So it was self-report, 30 items, and those collapsed into a single measure of trait emotional intelligence, calculated greenness exposure with the normalized vegetation difference index, NVDI, over the life course of the respondent. We retrieved sociodemographic information, both from the online questionnaires with respondents and from the census. And then we looked at other environmental factors, including population density and air quality index around these houses. Our sample characteristics, they were about 50% female and about 50% non-Hispanic white. The ages range from 18 to 27, and NDVI values range from 0.14 to 0.8 with a mean of 0.5. Here is where our respondents came from. You can see that they were concentrated in Illinois, where I was a faculty member in that area, and then we had colleagues in other areas. What did we find? Unexpectedly, we actually found that NDVI and individual emotional intelligence items, there were 30 of these, really didn't show much of a relationship. We only found one significant correlation, and that was between NDVI and lower levels of having a gloomy perspective. And then when we ran fully adjusted regression models, we found no significant associations after adjusting for gender, age, urbanicity, income, household size, and air quality. So we are a little bummed about this. We didn't show our hypothesis was true. And then we also, there's a growing body of literature suggesting different people of differing socioeconomic statuses benefit differently from nature exposure. So we ran stratified models where we split our sample into higher and lower income levels based off of the tract level demographics. And we found that there were differences, and there were some beneficial trends, and there were some actually negative trends between greenness and emotional intelligence. Here are fully adjusted models in the stratified sample. These were at the tract level, lower median household incomes. You can see on the left, in lower income households, showed that more greenness was associated with better emotional intelligence. And then in higher median household income neighborhoods, we actually showed negative associations, such that if you grew up in a greener area and you were a greener area that was also better well off, you tended to have lower emotional intelligence, which is quite interesting. Well, what are the potential explanations and implications? These are partially supported by another study that looked at stratified income findings in Scotland. They found that public green spaces were positively associated with pro-social behaviors for low-income respondents, and the opposite was true for high-income respondents. That flipped when you looked at privately owned green spaces. So there's something going on regarding the type of green space and income levels in that study, and maybe that's what's going on here. So for our respondents in the lower income areas, the socio-emotional benefits of public green spaces might be observed because they are visiting these places, interacting with others, rather than visiting these private green spaces. But we need to do more. It's a super important outcome. Some of the main caveats that should be overcome based off of our study design are doing something other than a correlational study, measuring actual time in nature, rather than just, we could also engage the types of access to nature. Are they playing in nature or playing with nature, for example? Most notably, our income findings were limited by neighborhood level data. So what would be needed would be perceived social class, actual family income. In conclusion, what we're finding is that there's partial support based off of this one study for emotional intelligence being linked to greenness, but those were only found for respondents that grew up in lower income areas. We expect that nature play constituted a part of these beneficial exposure pathways. That is one of the types of engagement with nature that this demographic, or at least leading up to young adulthood, may be particularly important for social emotional development. And finally, neighborhood greening might help children's future personal and professional success through enhancing their ability to understand, use, and manage their emotions. Thank you for your attention. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Clemson University if you have any questions or want to chat about this further. Thank you.